What if I told you that the baby boom wasn't just a demographic event, but a cultural earthquake that reshaped the very foundations of American life? What if the choices made by parents in the 1940s and 1950s, choices rooted in prosperity, conformity, and a desperate desire for stability, set the stage for rebellion, upheaval, and transformation that still reverberates today? And what if the comforts and opportunities given to those children became the very fuel for their dissatisfaction, their anger, and their drive to change the world? Stay with me until the end, because this isn't just about history. It's about understanding how we got here, why the baby boom generation became both celebrated and criticized, and what their story says about the society we live in now. The baby boom begins in the shadow of hardship. The parents of that era had lived through the Great Depression, a time when dreams were postponed, families struggled to survive, and financial security was almost impossible to achieve. Then came World War II, which demanded sacrifice, discipline, and endurance. By the time the war ended, there was a collective hunger for normalcy, for stability, for a life that felt safe and prosperous. Families moved into suburbs, bought homes, and embraced the ideal of family life. This wasn't just about shelter, it was about identity. The suburban home became a symbol of success, of having survived the chaos of the past and finally being able to live the dream. Out of this environment came the baby boom, an unprecedented surge in births. Millions of children were born in a short span of years, creating a demographic explosion that reshaped society. Adults who had delayed starting families during the Depression now felt secure enough to have children. Soldiers returning from the war were eager to settle down, marry, and raise families. The result was a generation larger than any before it, and their sheer numbers gave them a unique place in history. For these children, life was different from that of earlier generations. Normally, young people aspired to adulthood where cultural and political power resided, but baby boomers grew up with the spotlight already on them. Media, advertising, and popular culture reinforced the idea that their lives mattered. Magazines featured stories about youth culture, television programs celebrated family life, and schools and communities were organized around the needs of children. From Little League games to PTA meetings, suburban life revolved around the next generation. This constant focus gave baby boomers a sense of importance and possibility. They were told to dream big, aspire beyond convention, and believe in their own significance. At the same time, they were expected to conform, to succeed in traditional ways, to be proper, and to uphold the values of their parents. It was a paradox, encouraged to reach for the stars, yet guided to remain within the boundaries of respectability. This tension would later fuel the rebellious spirit of the 1960s. Economic prosperity reinforced these cultural messages. The post war years were marked by unprecedented growth. Defense spending during the Cold War poured money into the economy, while the sheer size of the baby boom created massive demand for goods and services. Families bought homes, cars, appliances, and toys. Suburban neighborhoods flourished and consumer culture expanded. For children, this meant growing up in a world of abundance where opportunities seemed limitless. Compared to earlier generations, baby boomers had horizons that stretched far beyond survival. Those who grew up in the 1920s and 1930s had been forced to limit their dreams by economic hardship. World War II demanded sacrifice and discipline. But for the children of the 1950s, the world appeared open and inviting. They were raised to believe that life could be different, that change was possible, and that they themselves were central to the story of America. Yet this idyllic vision was not universal. The civil rights movement revealed the contradictions at the heart of American society. While white middle class families celebrated prosperity in the suburbs, African Americans and other marginalized groups faced discrimination, poverty, and violence. Television brought images of brutality into living rooms, exposing the gap between the idealized image of America and its harsher realities. For many young people, this contradiction fueled anger and disillusionment. They had been taught to believe in fairness and opportunity, yet they saw injustice all around them. This awakening was crucial. Without the civil rights movement, the rebellious spirit of the 1960s might never have taken shape. The movement showed young people that the world was not as perfect as they had been led to believe. It challenged them to question authority, to demand change, and to see themselves as agents of transformation. The anger of the generation was not born in a vacuum. It came from the clash between the idealized promises of their upbringing and the realities of American life. The baby boom generation was also shaped by the Cold War. Fear of communism and nuclear conflict loomed large, but it also fueled economic growth. Defense spending created jobs and technological innovation. At the same time, the threat of global conflict added urgency to the idea of building strong families and communities. Parents wanted stability, and children grew up in a world where prosperity was shadowed by the possibility of catastrophe. This duality, abundance and anxiety, added another layer to the baby boomer experience. By the late 1950s and early 1960s, the contradictions of the era were becoming clear. Suburban life, once celebrated as idyllic, began to feel insular and confining. The emphasis on conformity clashed with the growing desire for individuality. Youth culture blossomed, fueled by music, fashion, and new forms of expression. Rock and roll, make-out parties, and rebellious styles signaled that the generation was ready to break free from the expectations of their parents. The sheer size of the baby boom generation amplified its impact. When millions of young people began questioning authority, embracing new ideas, and demanding change, society could not ignore them. They were not a small subculture, they were the largest generation in American history. Their voices carried weight, and their actions reshaped politics, culture, and society. Looking back, it is clear that the baby boom was more than just a surge in births. It was the product of historical forces: the Depression, World War II, the Cold War, and the prosperity of the post war years. It was shaped by cultural ideals of family and suburbia, by the contradictions revealed through civil rights, and by the unique position of children as the center of attention. Together, these forces created a generation that believed in its own significance, that dared to dream, and that ultimately transformed the world. The legacy of the baby boomers is complex. They were raised in comfort and abundance, yet confronted with injustice and inequality. They were taught to conform, yet encouraged to dream. They grew up believing they were special, and in many ways, they were. Their sheer numbers, combined with the cultural and economic forces of their time, gave them the power to redefine society. From civil rights to women's liberation, from music to politics, the baby boomers left an indelible mark on history. In the end, the story of the baby boom is the story of America itself, a nation emerging from hardship, embracing prosperity, confronting contradictions, and striving for change. The children of the post war years were not just passive participants in this story, they were its protagonists. And the world they inherited, questioned, and reshaped continues to bear the imprint of their generation. But let's go deeper, because if we want to stretch this narrative to its full weight, we need to understand not just the broad strokes, but the texture of everyday life. Imagine being a child in the 1950s suburbs. Your neighborhood is filled with kids your age because everyone is having children at the same time. Your days are structured around school, sports, and family activities. Your parents are deeply invested in your success, attending PTA meetings, organizing Little League games, and making sure you have every opportunity to thrive. You are told that your life matters, that you are the future, that you can achieve anything. Yet at the same time, you are expected to follow the rules, to respect authority, to fit into the mold of the ideal child. This dual message, dream big, but stay in line, creates a tension that defines your generation. Now imagine being a teenager in the early 1960s. You open Life magazine and see a pictorial essay on makeout parties in California. Suddenly, your own experiences are being validated by national media. Hey guys, in a world pushing you to own nothing and be happy, crypto is your key to survival. Join Angry's Crypto Academy to master buying, selling, and trading crypto. Make huge profits and safeguard your wealth. Plus, discover the one crypto virtually no one is talking about, poised to create new millionaires in the upcoming bull run. The link is in the description of the video below. Go check it out now. You realize that your life, your culture, your generation is at the center of attention. This realization is intoxicating. You feel powerful, significant, capable of shaping the world, but you also feel the weight of expectations, the pressure to succeed in conventional ways, the demand to uphold the values of your parents. This tension fuels your desire to rebel, to break free, to create a culture that is uniquely your own. The civil rights movement intensifies this tension. You see images of violence on television, hear stories of discrimination and injustice, and realize that the idealized vision of America does not match reality. You feel anger, frustration, and a desire for change. You begin to question authority, to challenge the status quo, to demand justice. This awakening is not limited to race, it extends to gender, to class, to culture. You begin to see the world in new ways, to imagine possibilities beyond the confines of suburban life. The Cold War adds another layer of complexity. You grow up with the constant threat of nuclear conflict, the fear of communism, the anxiety of global instability, yet at the same time, you benefit from the economic growth fueled by defense spending. You live in a world of abundance, yet you are haunted by the possibility of catastrophe. This duality shapes your worldview, making you both optimistic and anxious, both confident and uncertain. By the late 1960s, the contradictions of your upbringing come to a head. You rebel against the very structures that had defined your childhood. The suburban ideal, once celebrated as the pinnacle of American life, began to feel suffocating. The rules, the expectations, the conformity, all of it seemed designed to keep you in line rather than let you explore who you truly were. Music became a weapon, fashion became a statement, and rebellion became a rite of passage. Rock and roll wasn't just entertainment, it was a declaration of independence. The counterculture wasn't just a fad, it was a rejection of the values that had been drilled into you since birth. You were raised to believe you were special, and now you demanded the freedom to prove it on your own terms. The baby boom generation's sheer size magnified every act of rebellion. When millions of young people began questioning authority, embracing new ideas, and demanding change, society couldn't dismiss them as fringe radicals. They were the mainstream. Their voices carried weight, their actions reshaped politics, and their culture became the dominant narrative. The protests, the sit ins, the marches, these weren't isolated events. They were the collective expression of a generation raised to believe in its own significance, now determined to redefine what that significance meant. But let's not romanticize it too much. The baby boomers were also deeply contradictory. They were raised in comfort and abundance, yet confronted with injustice and inequality. They were taught to conform, yet encouraged to dream. They grew up believing they were special, and in many ways they were. But that belief also bred entitlement, arrogance, and a sense of inevitability about their role in history. They were the largest generation, and they knew it. They wielded their numbers like a weapon, reshaping society not just because they wanted to, but because they could. The civil rights movement was the moral awakening, but prosperity was the fuel. The economic boom of the 1950s and 1960s created a world of indulgence, of seemingly unlimited horizons. Parents bought homes, cars, televisions, and appliances. Children grew up surrounded by material abundance with opportunities that earlier generations could only dream of. This prosperity gave them the confidence to demand more, to expect more, to believe that change was not only possible, but inevitable. Yet it also created a gap between the idealized image of America and the reality of those left behind. For every suburban family enjoying prosperity, there were others struggling with poverty, discrimination, and exclusion. This gap fueled anger, resentment, and rebellion. The Cold War added another layer of complexity. Fear of communism and nuclear conflict loomed large, shaping politics, culture, and everyday life. Children practiced duck and cover drills in school, growing up with the constant awareness that catastrophe could strike at any moment. Yet at the same time, defense spending fueled economic growth, creating jobs and technological innovation. This duality, abundance and anxiety, defined the baby boomer experience. They lived in a world of prosperity, yet were haunted by the possibility of annihilation. This tension shaped their worldview, making them both optimistic and anxious, both confident and uncertain. By the late 1960s, the contradictions of their upbringing came to a head. The civil rights movement, the Vietnam War, the women's liberation movement, and the counterculture all converged to create a period of upheaval and transformation. Baby boomers were at the center of it all, demanding change and challenging authority and reshaping society. They were not passive participants in history, they were its protagonists. Their sheer numbers, combined with the cultural and economic forces of their time, gave them the power to redefine what it meant to be American. And yet, the legacy of the baby boomers is complicated. They were the generation of rebellion, but also the generation of conformity. They fought for civil rights, but also embraced consumerism. They demanded change, but also benefited from the very structures they criticized. They were raised to believe they were special, and they lived their lives as if they were. But that belief also created blind spots, contradictions, and failures. They reshaped society, but they also left behind problems that future generations would have to solve. The story of the baby boom is the story of America itself, a nation emerging from hardship, embracing prosperity, confronting contradictions, and striving for change. The children of the post war years were not just passive participants in this story, they were its protagonists. And the world they inherited, questioned, and reshaped continues to bear the imprint of their generation. So, what do you think? Do you agree with this perspective on the baby boomers and the way they were raised? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Like the video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you like the video, share the video. And just remember that all roads lead to MWA, men walking away, and cheers.
Nothing says you care like crypto. Nothing can compare. Nothing says you care like crypto. Oh, nothing can compare to crypto.